Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. We are continuing the Hannibal series, of course. We just saw the first battle of Nola. Basically, obviously, Hannibal's working against Marcellus, and Marcellus is actually doing good. We see that Hannibal is stationed in Capua, the second largest city in all of the Italian peninsula, and Rome's looking like they have life. But let's jump in and see where this episode will take us. As always, make sure you hit that like button. It really does help the channel. Let's jump right in. Battle of Cornus today.
By the autumn period of 216 BC, Hannibal was consolidating his power base in southern Italy. His main army at Capua stood at around 40,000 men, including additions from his Samnite allies. His brother Mago, now on his way south with 1,200 Numidians, would recruit an additional 17,000
That is a huge recruiting mission. 17,000?
Lucanians and Bruttians, and bring his own force up to over 18,000 troops.
Jeez.
Opposing them, Rome scrambled to raise new legions over the coming months. An impressive 80,000 troops would be put to field in Italy, with the majority concentrated in the south. But despite the Roman numerical strength exceeding that of their enemy, many of these were inexperienced recruits who felt abject terror at the thought of meeting Hannibal in battle.
Well, yeah, like they have continuously lost against Hannibal, so I'd be scared, and his legend probably speaks larger than anything at this point.
Worse, in some of the settlements of central Italy, the number of Roman and allied fighting men began to dwindle, which was a testament to the blood toll exacted on them by Hannibal's tactical superiority and his wealth of ideas on the battlefield. Fabius Maximus, the father of the Fabian strategy, would again be elected consul for the next 2 years. He would revert to avoiding conflict with the Carthaginian general to preserve the troops and give Rome's manpower time to recover. But while the war was thus far mostly dominated by the campaign of Hannibal in Italy, as the year 215 rolled around, the Second Punic War would spread across the Mediterranean.
What do you mean? It's already in Iberia. It's sort of in North Africa, but it's not really been fighting there. Where else?
While Hannibal worked to add to his list of allies, his other objective was reinforcements. His brother Mago advanced south and besieged Petelia. Together with Consentia, these two cities were among the most prominent in Bruttium, boasting a developed infrastructure, imposing walls, and a bustling city culture. In its quest to establish dominion over Italy, Rome favored the urban centers of Bruttium and had long been replacing their local ruling elite with the pro-Roman aristocracy.
Are we going to Sicily? I was thinking about that.
In turn, the pro-Roman factions of Petelia and Consentia treated the less urbanized communities in the region with disdain, which created a rift among Bruttians. Needless to say, these internal divisions suited Rome as they made the region easier to control. But Mago now used this hostile factionalism to his advantage. He circulated news that Petelia was besieged, prompting thousands of Bruttians, who were angry at the city for siding with Rome, to join Hannibal.
Smart. Very
With
smart.
his work in Bruttium complete, Mago left Hanno the Elder in charge of the army and embarked for Carthage to seek support for the campaign in Italy.
Yeah, because Carthage really hasn't sent them a lot. They've sent them, I think, once. They've sent some reinforcements.
By this stage, neither side was the undisputed master of the sea. While Rome had overall superiority, the Carthaginian navy had significantly recovered from the setback earlier in the war. Both could patrol far into enemy waters and raid coastal towns, but lacked the strength to rule the waves of the western Mediterranean. But with most of Bruttium now under Hannibal's control, there was less risk for transporting troops from Africa to Italy. And with this, Mago disembarked in Carthage. Murmurs reverberated in the packed Senate.
It's a really good animation.
Hall. In attendance, all of Carthage's notables anxiously waited. Then Mago rose to speak, presenting before the Senate the progress of the campaign in Italy. Colleagues, countrymen, since crossing the Alps, Hannibal had won several victories, including 3 great pitched battles against Rome's main armies, 2 of which were completely destroyed and their camps looted. And now the Romans avoid fighting us altogether out of fear.
It's really good propaganda for Carthaginians. Like the effect of crossing the Alps alone is legend enough. But then 3 pitched battles, the Battle of Cannae, it's in the Fabian strategy works in favor of the Carthaginians on an optic level, meaning they see it as we are formidable to them in such a way to where they don't even want to fight. They are terrified to fight us, which should help recruit more people because they're behind someone they believe in.
200,000 Roman fighting men are slain and 50,000 prisoners are taken. Italy is in a state of revolt, and the south had gone over to Hannibal. With a single army, Hannibal had achieved all of this against several Roman armies. Mago then turned away from the map to present to the Senate a bag filled with hundreds of golden rings belonging to the Roman aristocracy that fell at Cannae. He asked for funds and additional armies to be sent to Italy. With another 20,000 to 30,000 troops at his disposal, Hannibal would break Rome. Mago's presentation suggested that with the 18,000-strong army that he himself had recruited, consistent pressure could be applied in Bruttium until the last of the cities loyal to Rome either came to Hannibal's side or were taken by force. Another army of 20,000 from Carthage could take and hold Apulia and its vital ports, thereby cutting Rome's ability to contest the waters of the Ionian Sea.
Yeah, if they get that, then, I mean, they have the whole boot at that point. And there is no south contention. And for a while, at least, they would have to march through Campania or somewhere through, as he was talking about, Apulia, to get that control back. It just does not look good for Rome and on a logistics side.
This would open lines of communication between Hannibal and a likely ally, Philip V of Macedon, enabling uninterrupted transport of ships, provisions, and troops. Finally, stationed in Campania with his main host, Hannibal would have complete control over southern Italy. With 3 armies in close proximity, capable of quickly combining their forces, as well as controlling their respective areas individually, Carthaginian authority over local communities and cities would be absolute. As such, Hannibal could fully exploit southern Italy's manpower and resources to beat the Romans at their own game, the war of attrition, and could use his tactical brilliance to dominate the Romans on the battlefield. Hearing Mago's report, most of the Senate rejoiced.
We got a guy sleeping in the back left. That's nice. Love that.
But, as fortunes of war would have it, Hannibal's worst enemies were not in Rome, but in Carthage.
Were they going to say this is a unjust war? What are they going to say?
When Hanno II stood up to speak, a heavy silence fell upon the room. He was an immensely powerful aristocrat and a veteran commander, albeit not a very competent one. Most of his wealth and political power was derived from his stake in the silver mines of Iberia and the heavy taxation he imposed on African tribes that lived on the vast expanses of land which he owned. As such, in the Senate he represented the interests of the wealthy, for whom it was profitable to sue for peace with Rome, even with unfavorable terms for Carthage, because a peace agreement would enable Hanno and his supporters to assume their maritime commercial operations.
Yep, that makes sense. Rome's what? Who's in charge?
In addition, their interests in rare metals is the reason why Hanno favored redirecting reinforcements to protect Iberia, and why he preferred territorial expansion not into Italy, but into Africa, where he and his powerful friends stood to profit from expanding their already endless tracts of taxable land.
In Numidia?
These discrepancies between the interests of the super-wealthy and the war effort of Carthage was what made Hanno the leading opponent of the Barca family and their war of conquest in Italy. He addressed Mago. "You say the armies of the enemy are slain, yet you ask for more soldiers. You say the enemy camps are looted, yet you ask for corn and funds."
Yeah, bro, because it only lasts so long. We mean we asked for troops. We put down 200,000 with our little army that we've migrated from Iberia through the Alps through the Italian peninsula. We've had to recruit tribes and people. We want our own men. We want logistics. But you care too much about your greed versus the sole needs of this nation.
I wonder, if you ask for all of this help, is Hannibal truthful about his victories? If he is,
why don't you go see it?
Then I say he doesn't need help from us, and if he is not, then he doesn't deserve it. At hearing this, senators from the docks behind Hanno cheered him on. He continued, "You say, Mago, that Roman power is annihilated and that Italy is in a state of revolt. I ask you then, has a single Roman or any of the 35 tribes come to our side?"
Bro is just not listening. He's one of those kids that did not listen in class. He just told you that they've been able to recruit. Well, he didn't tell you. I don't think he told you that he was able to recruit the Gallic tribes, but he did. And then they've revolted in Campania. They've revolted in Britannia, or whatever you call it, in Apulia. They are almost revolting. Like, bro, these are not Romans. What do you mean Romans sided with us? That's the enemy. Like, that's the direct, isolated enemy. This guy's making no sense.
"No, they have not," Mago replied. Hanno went on. "Then there are still too many Romans left."
Okay, we need more troops to take them out. You're so stupid.
"You know then, Mago, is the enemy's will to fight broken? Have they approached Hannibal for peace?" "I do not know," Mago answered. A truthful answer, given that he parted ways with Hannibal soon after the Battle of Cannae, and was unaware if any negotiations with Rome were taking place.
There you go.
"Well then," Hanno concluded, "with many Romans still in the fight, and no treating of peace, you have made no progress since the start of the war."
This guy needs to be like thrown off a balcony. He's just a griper, bro. He does not even he's just, like you say, he's just a greedy guy that doesn't.
I say, if Hannibal's victories are true, he should seek terms with Rome and not ask for help from Carthage. For if he cannot obtain peace after his supposed victories, what terms will he be able to obtain if his fortunes against the Romans change?
Alright, I know I'm pausing a lot. Alright, in this case, we're going to go talk to Philip the Macedon, and we're going to convert ourselves to Macedonian, and Iberia will become Macedonian. Now what do you want? What do you want to do now? Do you want to send troops now? Now? You want to send troops?
It seems to me that we are not discussing peace, but only talking about helping the agenda of one man, Hannibal. Hanno clearly showed in this senatorial meeting why he was one of the most capable orators of his time. But as clever as he was in discrediting Hannibal, the supporters of the Barcids were outraged,
Good.
and they had every reason to be. Hanno insisted that Carthage must negotiate with Rome, that peace was necessary, thereby implying that Carthage should not and cannot risk the consequences of losing the war, but must make peace now while the going is good. If this fear of defeat ever reached the enemy, for the Romans it would be like smelling blood. Despite their setbacks against Hannibal, with such division among Carthage's top officials, the Romans would know that they had already won the war.
Yeah, because you have people like Hanno II that only have, like, you're talking about, like, only for one man. Although he literally, in his argument to this council, suggests that the maritime strategy of his wealth that's being derived in Iberia is prominent to the whole nature of what their survival is. They want to expand in Africa. Well, that sounds like it's something that's not, that seems like it's a secondary metric right now. You're in active war. Believe it or not, you're in active war. Things like this is not going, like, Hannibal or not Hannibal, things were going to, like, you don't think that Rome was going to encroach the Iberian Peninsula sooner than later? Of course they were. This is like not seeing for the forest for the trees at this point.
So it's needless to say that Hanno's dissemination of this dangerous rhetoric directly undermined Carthage's war effort and perhaps its future as an imperial power.
Yeah.
As Hannibal once said to his men, war is won by those who are ready to conquer or die.
Very true. And that is Rome. That is Rome, true and true. They will die. They will die for their beliefs.
And Rome had already shown its readiness to conquer or perish. Carthage, having chosen to walk the path of empire for 600 years, had to show that same resolve if it was to be victorious and retain its imperial status.
But think about it, like, Carthage is like the product of the Phoenicians. They are a maritime. That's why their navy is so good, because they're the master of the sea. They have lived that life for so long that this is almost a foreign concept. And think about, like, Hasdrubal, even before, isn't that his name? The name of Hannibal? It came from a different line. Like, this is like a different concept. But I mean, if you want to keep those silver mines, you got to understand how to conquer land at the same time. And you want to conquer Africa, well, that's land as well. So, like, maritime is great, but at the same time, you also want these other ambitions, but you have to be able to fund those ambitions.
Hannibal's supporters further argued that, as the only man who showed consistent success in command, deep in enemy territory no less, he must be supported, even if Iberia was lost. In their view, to conquer a peace agreement at the gates of Rome meant that the withdrawal of Roman troops from Iberia could be demanded as a condition during negotiations, and Carthaginian dominance over the western Mediterranean could be restored. Amidst this ongoing political turmoil in Carthage, the majority of the Senate was nevertheless impressed enough with Mago's report to vote in favor of sending him back to Italy with an army and funds to aid Hannibal. A host of 12,000 African infantry, up to
40 more elephants. Just don't send them to the Alps this time, please.
6,000 Numidian cavalry and around 40 elephants were to be assembled. But Hanno's political tentacles reached across the empire, and he would severely slow down the recruitment of Hannibal's reinforcements at every turn, prolonging the process for around 6 months.
Wow.
Then, as the latter days of autumn brought with them the scent of the stinging coldness that was just around the corner, a message arrived from Sardinia. It was from Hampsi Cora of Cornus, a Sardo-Punic political leader and one of the richest landowners of Sardinia. Much of the island was still dominated by the Punic elite, especially along the western and southern coasts, which were part of the Carthaginian Empire for over 250 years, until Sardinia came under Roman control just 20 years ago, in 237 BC.
Right, it was like after the effects of the First Punic War, they took a land grab.
This resulted in a strained relationship between the Romans and Sardinia's ruling class and its population. Occasional clashes flared up, but the legions were largely able to keep the peace and exploit the island's rich resources of grain, salt, wine, and olives, as well as several big mining operations of gold and silver, a valuable source for minting new currency, and lead, which was used in various fields of civil life, from crockery to water pipes.
Wow, water pipes.
But most importantly, Sardinia was a vital point for controlling access to Roman waters and could serve to intercept Carthaginian shipping to the south. However, the situation was now ripe for revolt. The ambassadors that carried the message pleaded for help, and the Carthaginian Senate made a decision to mobilize another army of 12,000 infantry and 1,500 horse to be sent to Sardinia under the command of Hasdrubal the Bold. Meanwhile, on the restive island, Hampsicora was joined by Hanno of Tharos. Their combined force motivated more cities to rise up, and some of the inland tribes pledged their support as well. Rebellion in Sardinia had begun. News of the unrest had reached Praetor Quintus Mucius Scaevola, a member of the ancient and noble patrician family. He immediately sent word back to Rome, asking for help. The Roman legion under his command was under strength due to sickness that he too suffered from and was unable to perform his duties. Provisions and payments for the troops were irregular amidst the chaos of the war, which only made the situation worse. Upon receiving his message, the Roman Senate hurriedly sent Titus Manlius Torquatus with a small contingent and provisions to patch up the legion in Sardinia. Titus was a distinguished Roman politician, twice a consul in 235 and 224 BC, and a member of the Manlia family, one of the most important patrician families of the Republic.
Wow.
Once he disembarked at Cagliari, Titus temporarily assumed command, bringing news that more reinforcements would come next spring. But upon learning of the activities of the rebels, he realized that he would not be able to hold out through the winter. The legion was still under strength and in poor health. Worse, once the Sardo-Punic army fully mobilized, they would outnumber the Romans at least 2-1.
Yeah, that's not a good start. Not a good start for this little revolt.
And this ratio would rise to 4-1 if the Carthaginians managed to reach the island before winter. Something needed to be done now. So Titus took provisions to last a few days and gathered no more than 6,000 men that were fit to march towards Cornus. Meanwhile, Hampsicora journeyed into the Sardinian interior to recruit troops from the tribes that declared their support for the uprising. He left his son Hiostus in charge of the 10,000-strong army and a collection of provisions until he returned. But Titus was closing in fast.
It's pretty even at this point, and a little bit more towards Hiostus's army, but...
On approach, the numerical advantage of the Sardo-Punic army was clear. Tucked in between the sea to the west and the hills to the east, they held a strong position with the walls of Cornus behind them. But Titus observed that the enemy was not in full battle order and that no archers were manning the walls. It appeared as if they were not expecting a battle. He ordered the Roman line forward. All too aware of the poor physical condition of his men, Titus slowed the advance to a crawl, making it easier for his tired troops to maintain their formation.
They're tired and they're about to go fight. It's not good.
He had hoped that by closing the distance he would unnerve the enemy and force them into committing themselves forward. If the Sardo-Punic troops broke formation to charge, this would give the compact Roman legion a chance. But Hiostus's orders were not to attack. Titus gradually halted his advance a mere stone's throw away from the opponent, yet they wouldn't move. Understanding that it would be impossible to dislodge a more numerous and better rested army from their defensive position, the Roman general resorted to harsh language. He berated Hiostus, questioning his bravery and his manhood. Some of the centurions joined in with their own insults. The laughter of the Roman troops could be heard inside the city.
Everyone is laughing at
The young Sardo-Punic aristocrat was fuming. After a few minutes of this verbal barrage, he could take no more.
Kill him.
With their pride bruised, Hiostus's men attacked with zest. The weary Roman line bore the initial brunt of the charge with some difficulty, but they held their nerve, encouraged by experienced centurions to stay compact behind their shields until the enemy ran out of steam. Titus then gave the signal. The formation of the less disciplined Sardo-Punic troops quickly began to crumble against the advance of the veteran legionaries. Step by step, the Roman line trod forward, jabbing at the enemy from behind the wall of shields. It soon became clear that Hiostus's rash attack for the sake of saving face in front of his men was a bad decision. By attacking the Roman line, he abandoned his strong defensive position and trapped his own army between the enemy, the hills and the sea, and the walls of the city. Unable to escape, 5,700 Sardo-Punic troops, some 60% of his army, were cut down.
Oh, that's not good.
But the exhausted Romans could fight no more and had begun taking losses as well. Seeing that his men are at their limit, Titus pulled back.
My God.
The Roman victory at Cornus did not succeed in destroying one Sardo-Punic army before another one could be assembled, but it gave Titus some time to prepare for the next encounter. Many of his men died on the way back due to exhaustion and sickness, but Titus's swift action killed off some of the best troops that the rebel cities could levy and had put a dent in the morale of the Sardo-Punic army. Whatever troops Hampsicora recruited from the other cities and tribes further inland, he would now likely be more inclined to wait for the Carthaginian army to come to his aid than to take on the Romans himself.
Yeah, would.
For now, the Roman army in Sardinia held on.
Wow. That's what we did obviously today. So much happening, whether it be like the political unrest or uphill happening in Carthage around sending more reinforcements, which eventually happened. More elephants, more men, more cavalry. And then the little battle that we just witnessed on Sardinia, where we see a revolt continue to try to spread and was kind of put down. I would say that that's very fortunate that there was it was almost like a 1-to-1 ratio versus a 2-to-1 ratio for the Roman army, especially in the setting and the environment they were in, compared to like whether it be the defensive strategy or it be their men and how sickly they were when they traveled up their way. See, a lot of them died on the way back. Now you're going to have more troops come from Carthage, and Sardinia is going to have really much unless you get a contingent of Roman troops to Sardinia, you're really going to have a lean towards complete revolt and complete control for Carthage on that island. But we will see. Thank you guys for joining me again. As always, make sure you hit that subscribe button as we continuously learn through history. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out. Goodbye.